This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Alexx Michael, bassist known for his band Shameless and most recently for touring with Cherie Currie, the legendary singer of the all-girl band The Runaways. Shameless is a hard rock glam band formed in the spring of 1989 by bassist Alexx Michael in Munich, Germany. After a breakup, Michael decided to reform Shameless in 1998 with his friend and guitar player BC. Alex enlisted the help from Kiss drummer Eric Singer, from Kiss, Alice Cooper, and Black Sabbath, who introductions to Steve Summers' Pretty Boy Floyd and Stevie Rachelle from Tuff. They started a long-lasting musical relationship. Since then, the international outfit has released 9 full-length albums, 1 live record, 2 compilations. The band already released the single Live Your Dream in conjunction with Michael's book, Looking Inside, The Stainless Sensation, a 500-page deluxe-bound book. Most recently, Michael has been nominated for the leadership team of the DeLorean Owners Association, Definitive History, John DeLorean, the DMC-12, and the DeLorean Motor Company. I can't thank you enough for being on the show, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's very exciting. You know, I was a big fan of music in the 80s. I still am. And I remember your band. I remember your songs. But more importantly, when we recently reconnected, I didn't know about all of your stuff with the DeLorean. So to have you on the guest on this show, it's just like a double honor, honestly. It's really incredible. You know, I just wanted to start out, since many people may not know your early days. So how did you get into music as a young child, maybe, or were you always from Germany? What is your real story?
I grew up in Germany and I still live here, even though I travel a lot. And the music thing pretty much started when I was like around 4 years old, and my aunt, she gave my dad an Elvis Presley live record. And at that point, I had no idea about music. All I knew was like kids' music and maybe like the stuff that my parents were listening to. So my dad actually, he didn't like it at all. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? Like, who is that guy? And then the music just like blew my head off. And then so I was listening to Elvis when I was like, 4 years old. And like even like the kids in kindergarten, they were like, what is wrong with that kid? Like, why is he listening to stuff like that? Why isn't he listening to German Uftata music or like kids music and stuff like that? And then I also was a huge fan of like Batman comics. So, and then by the time I think I was like 7 or 8, I was checking on the TV and Kiss showed up. And I was like, what is that? That's like somehow like a more powered up, beefed up version of Elvis, but they look like Batman. This is insane. Because, like, you have to remember, like, as a little kid, you're not really exposed to stuff like that, especially not in a place like Germany. And so I was completely hooked. And then the same story repeated itself, like at school, when I was talking about Kiss or like playing it in school. The other kids had no idea what I was even talking about. And then half of them were scared of them. Like, especially Gene was like spitting blood and everything. They just couldn't believe it. And the funny thing is, like the principal of the school, he told my mother to come in, and then he told her, like, look, you have to do something about this. Like, this could have like a dangerous influence on the life of your son if he listens to that kind of music. And that was kind of like, like in a certain way, he was right, because that's pretty much what I'm still doing. But like, other than that, how some teachers and principals, how they are, have no idea. So, and that's pretty much how everything started.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think back, and you mentioned being in school, like, early school days. And I can vividly remember being like in the 3rd or 4th grade, and they had like a school concert. And one of the boys in my class, who I'm still friends with, till current day, he did his performance on a Kiss song, and it was just like a total drum solo. And the whole class was blown away. We talked about it for like a week, and all he does even till this day, I recently mentioned it to him, and he's like, yeah, but I didn't win. And it was like, it didn't matter. You were playing Kiss, you know. Nobody else was playing Kiss in the 3rd or 4th grade, you know. And it was, it's really good memories. But I do understand what you're saying about parents being concerned, because it was a very big visual thing, especially with a band like Kiss. You know, parents weren't understanding that. And I think that's what was the big motivator for kids to kind of like that, because they were not like everyone else. They were pushing the envelope, and there was an attraction there. And like you said, it was very much animated. It was like watching TV shows or cartoons.
Yeah. And that happened with a few things, because like another musical artist that like I'm a huge fan of, it was the exact same thing. My parents would always go to some dancing classes. It was Thursday evening, and they always told me like, look, by the time it's 8, turn off the TV and go to bed. But obviously when I knew they wouldn't come home until like midnight, so of course I would stay up and watch TV. And then there was this German TV show called Bio's Bahnhof, which means like his train station. And then he introduces this woman, Kate Bush. And that to me was just like also so fascinating, because like at the age of 8, like this is not against women by any means, but like when you grow up in Germany, like I had no idea that women would even do that kind of music, because like the only female singers that we knew in Germany were just like some cheesy pop artists that were like singing music, not even pop, like they were doing music for like parents. So, and then I saw her, and it was just like the way she was moving and dancing, and her voice, I was like, this is like so unreal. And I was like so hooked to that woman when I was like 8 years old. And of course, like, you know, so then I was the complete freak at school. Like he's listening to that weird band, and then to this strange woman, you know, like, and like everybody was pretty much shocked about like my choices of entertainment.
Yeah, I can understand that. So did you start to kind of emulate that? Did you start growing your hair out, or when did you get involved with playing a guitar?
Well, I didn't start growing my hair like until I was like 14 or something. But the music journey started actually, we had like guitar lessons in school. So I went there for like a year, but it just didn't work out, because at that point I was already reading everything in regards to music and like watching. I remember there was a Kate Bush documentary on TV a Saturday in the late evening, and I told my parents, I have to see this. This is like so important. And of course my parents are like, I remember my mom like, oh my God, like the way she sings and everything. I was like, no, I have to see this. So like, and so then I started those guitar lessons in school. But the problem was that the teacher was like also one of those typical Bavarian Uftata guys, you know. So like all they showed us were like some Bavarian folk songs. And I was like, what is that all about? And then there was an incident where the teacher said something in the regards of like, well, you don't seem to be interested. I said like, yeah, no, I want to play guitar, but not that kind of music. And he was like, so what do you want to learn? And I said like, what, you know, something like Kiss or the Beatles. Because at that age, when I was like 10, I also got into the Beatles. Then he said this stupid thing. He was like, well, that is not possible, because like all those people that go into the studio to record those records, they have to study music for at least 10 or 15 years until they're actually allowed into a studio. And then I told him, like, how is that possible when Paul McCartney was like barely 18 when they recorded the first Beatles record, and the Kiss guys were also like in their early 20s. So how could they've studied that long? Because of that, like they kicked me out of that class. Because like the teacher was getting all mad, like, oh, you're trying, you know, to insult me. I said like, no, that's just like the truth. And he was like, well, you're only like 11 years old. Like, how would you know? I said like, what? Because like I read about those things since I was like 7. And then I got kicked out of that class.
Oh, wow.
And then I stopped playing guitar or anything for like, I think like 3 or 4 years until Kiss released their first like live video. It was from the Animalize tour. So I got the VHS and I put it on and I watch it. And then like, that was the first time I really saw close-ups, like when somebody's playing guitar and I was looking at it, it's like there was the song Thrills in the Night from the Animalize record. And I look at the video and I see how Paul's hands are moving. And I was like, and I did hit the pause button on the VHS. And I was like, okay, that doesn't look complicated. So like, I grabbed a piece of paper, made the lines like the strings and put like, okay, that finger is on the 5th fret and this one is on the 7th fret on the string below. So I grabbed the guitar back out of the basement and I was like, and I was like, oh my God, I can play this. So I started to go through the songs and I think within like maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, I knew every song on that video. And then I just started to learn from there. I was like, okay, I guess it's easier if I just show it to myself instead of like trying to find a teacher that doesn't understand what I want to do. And that's like how I started playing. And then I was just like playing all the time. So actually first I was a guitar player. And then after like 2 or 3 months, I was like, yeah, but like, if you want to do something, you cannot only play stuff from other people, like you have to write songs. Because I remember like interviews by Paul Stanley and like some other people where they talked about like, writing your own material. And then I was like, okay, I guess now I have to start to write songs. And then that's just like how it developed over time.
That's great, though. The way you talk about it, I know it was like a visual thing for you, but would you say that you learn like you have an ear for music, like you can hear the notes? Because some people feel that they have an ear for music. So if they hear something, they can just pick up and play it. So do you think you had a combination of that, or was it more like just studying it like by watching?
No, because like even before I started playing guitar, I always came up with vocal melodies in school, like like I had this song, it was called like The Teachers Are Stupid and stuff like that, but I came up with the whole song and I knew what the instruments would have to play so it makes sense. And that just like, I don't know where it came from, but like that just like was a thing. And still to this day, because my guitar player and me were always laughing about that, because the last couple of years, when I write the majority of the songs, and then very often when I come up with the vocal melody and stuff, and so many times I noticed, like when you have certain bands, when the song is playing and then it comes to the guitar solo has nothing to do with the rest of the song. And I always have the melodies for the guitar solos in my head. So what I do is like, I just use my phone, play the instrumental, and I sing the guitar solo into the phone. And then I send that to him and he understands what I want. And then he turns it into like a real guitar solo. And so that's always fun. And I hope nobody will ever hear me singing the guitar solos, because that's pretty painful. And my guitar player always says like, it first takes him like 10 minutes to laugh about what I'm trying to show, but then he knows what I want.
Yeah, that's really great. You mentioned something, because watching VHFs, in some way, you're kind of showing how far we've come, because we were watching MTV. We were having things like a VCR tape or a VHS tape. Things have come so far. So how did you form your first band? How did you get other kids to start playing with you?
Actually, that was a couple of years later. I think I was 18 at the time. And it just happened by accident, because like at that point, I was still like playing guitar, and then I started to go out and stuff, and then I went to this club, and this guy comes up to me and says like, wow, can you play bass? We need a bass player, and you look exactly like the guy that we need for the band. And I was like, no, I play guitar. And he was like, well, then, it shouldn't be a problem for you to learn the stuff on bass. I was like, okay, let's try it out. So I went to the audition, but it was just not my kind of music. But then I knew, okay, I think it's probably better if I just be the bass player and look for other people. Because like when I was like 2 years prior to that, I saw like a adult magazine, and there was this picture of a woman, and on the bottom it said like, it's time to get shameless. And I was like, oh my God, that is like the perfect name for a band. Because it's like, like in the 80s, you had all those bands like Motley Crue, Rat, Poison, Skid Row. I mean, like Skid Row at that point didn't exist, but like, but I just saw like, oh my God, like Shameless. That is like the most, like the greatest band name possible, because it's always relevant, and it's just like a word that people use all the time, and it's provocative. And I was just like, no, that's perfect. So I had already the idea. And then after that audition, I was like, okay, I have a couple of songs. Now it's time to form Shameless. And that's how Shameless started.
Oh, wow. So were you able to play with them as a bassist, or did you have to turn around and form your own band after that experience?
Yeah, because it was just like when I heard the singer, because I always felt like the German singers, they're not made for that kind of music. It doesn't work. It's just like, especially at that point, like you had, like in Munich, it was like half of the bands, they wanted to sound like Queensryche and stuff and show how many licks they can play. And that just wasn't my kind of singer. I mean, and then like Poison was a big influence for me, not because I was so much into the music, but when I saw them, I was like, I remember like somebody showed me he was in the States and brought back like a live tape of them, or like some demo kind of thing. And it was terrible. It was really bad, and I think it was like before they had the record deal. And I said to my friend, it's like, just listen to those guys there. They can't play either. They just have longer hair, and there's a producer putting it all together. So if they can do it, like, let's do it. And so that's why I always say like Poison was a big influence, because Kiss was just like larger than life. And in all the years that I was listening to Kiss, it was just like so far away that it never occurred to me, hey, I can do the same thing. But like with Poison, it was like, no, I can do that. That's not a difficult thing to do, And so, yeah, Poison was a big reason why I started the band, because I was like, oh, no, it's not that difficult.
Yeah, you're right. I can actually remember so clearly. It had to be like 1986 or something, when they did their, look what the Cat Drag did. Even a song like that still holds up to this day. It's exactly. Those were their early days.
Exactly. You don't have to be like a Ingve or like all those like. What is the guy's name? George Lynch. Like, you don't have to play like 5,000 notes, but their songs is what made it work. I mean, like, obviously, like, and I still say this to this day, like, the real talent in that band was always the guitar player. Like, when you listen to the, like some of those songs, like Fallen Angel, for example, or Nothing But a Good Time, like all his guitar solos work so perfect for the song. And then you have, like the other example, like Dokken, where like, yeah, the guitar player is probably a million times better than CC DeVille, but he never played for the song. It always like, a lot of times it sounds like he's almost fighting against the singer, which when you watch some documentaries or whatever about Dokken, and that was clearly the case, and you can hear that in the music.
Yeah, it's all of these bands that you're mentioning are still currently playing, which to me is just amazing. I mean, I just saw Dokken 2 years ago. They played locally And, they're still another timeless band. Poison comes around every summer to Jones Beach here in Long Island. And I'm like, it's amazing. It's like they're still going. But I want to get to the part where you form your band Shameless. And I love the story about how you found the name of it. I think that's so cool. But also, did you go around to like local clubs? I've never been to Munich, Germany, so I don't know what the club scene is. And also, like, is this also around 1986? Like, where are we in the timeline?
This is like late 88, and the drummer was a friend of mine from school, and the guitar player was a friend of mine who was also in a band at that point already, but like that band was also like, they had another one of those singers where you could tell, like, it just doesn't work. So then his band split up, and I told him, like, look, let's do something that we actually want to do. And then we were looking for a singer, and we found a guy who was okay at the time for what it was. But and that's pretty much how we started. And the funny thing was, we had the singer, we did the audition with him because he came from another city. And then, like, I think like 3 or 4 days later, we played our first show, and it was at a school party. So there was like, maybe like 500-600 people there. And at that point, we only had like 4 songs. So we played a couple of other songs by, I think it was like Faster Pussycat or something. Because it was just like, a fun thing to do. And that's pretty much like how the original lineup of Shameless started.
Yeah. So you were going around and playing. Did you get an agent, or how did you get picked up? How did you end up really recording further than being just a local band?
Okay, here's a real funny story for you. Because in the beginning, at that point, like music studios and stuff were just like so absolute expensive, and like we couldn't afford like to record a demo. So we did a little trick, and it actually, in the end, it all came together. I was in London for vacation, and I went to the store. It was called Shades, which was like a really popular music store back in the 80s until like mid-90s or something in London. And they were selling like demo tapes from bands from the States. And it was a demo from a band called Tuff. So I bought the demo, and I was like, oh my God, those songs are great. And then when it came to the point of like, we want to do shows, and the venue said, oh, we need to hear a demo. So what we did was like, we just copied the Tuff demo on a regular cassette and said like, well, this is ours. And funny enough, 9 years later, Stevie Rachelle joined Shameless, and on it's been already like 12 years ago, and we re-recorded one of those songs because Tuff never released the song. And then I told Stevie, look, we gotta do this song. And he was like, nah, no, it's an old song. I said, like, well, let us try it once. And we were on tour in Italy, and we played it, and the whole place went absolute berserk. And to this day, we play that song. And for the last like 3 or 4 years, Stevie, when he's on tour with Tuff, he's also playing that song again. So like the song really pretty much got a new life just because of that.
Oh, wow. So that was really risky to like send out a demo that was already someone else's demo. So
yeah,
after...
Back then, it was like, there was no internet or nothing. And like in Europe, you had no idea about like the bands that were out in the States. So it was like, well, nobody will find out. And then afterwards, we recorded our own stuff. But like in the beginning, we just didn't have any money. And like, I remember like telling Stevie that story the first time I met him. And we were just like laughing about it because it's so hysterical, like that, like, just 9 years later, like he ends up in that band,
Yes. It's so interesting. Your life, and we'll reflect on this later in the interview, but your life is really a lot about manifestation because as a little boy, you focused a lot on Kiss. And later on in your life, you have a lot of Kiss connections. And the same with the demo tape. You know, you pick up Tuff and manifesting somehow the guy ends up in your band. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of your life and a lot of your energy is putting out into the universe, and it's somehow coming back to you in all positive ways.
Well, I guess because like I've always been that way. Like if I do something, I have to do it like 100%. Like I don't do compromises or anything because that's just not me. And and just somehow like I was always lucky that all those things worked out. You know, like well, pretty much with everything. You know, like the last like 35, 40 years or something. No, not 40 years, but like you know, like a long time, and it's still going on.
Yes, you know, I give you a lot of credit. So this early period when you were picked up, you know, with this going past your demo and getting to open, you were probably an opener for a lot of bands. How did the touring start as a new band? Like, what did the early days of Shameless look like for you?
Well, funny enough, like the first real show that we did in a club in Munich. It was called the U2 Club, probably named after the band. And we had no idea like how it would, you know, if people would come. But like, since we were like really the only band that looked or sounded like that, and at that point, nobody in Germany, or like at least in Munich, was handing out flyers. And what we did, like about like 2 months before that show, we went to all the clubs and we had the flyers, but they didn't have a picture of the band or anything on it. It just said like, lock up your daughters, and it had the date of the show. So we handed out all those flyers, put them on the parking lot, everywhere. Like we didn't give them to people, but we just did put them like on cars and whatever. And then the next week, everybody was talking about them. Like, hey, Alex, have you seen this? Like, and it was like, no, well, what are you talking about? Well, I had this weird flyer on my car, and it says like, lock up your daughters. And it says like at the U2 on the date, like I think it was like at the end of January. So everybody was talking about this. And on that weekend, we did the photo shoot for the band. And then we had the flyers ready for the follow-up week. Because like for like 2 weeks, everybody was talking about those flyers. And then we did hand out the real ones, you know, with the date and the venue. And then people figured, oh my God, that was that flyer. But still, we had no idea what will happen. So the day of the show, like the owner of the venue was like, oh yeah, I think it was like Bonfire or like some other band that had like a record release party there. There was only like 50 or like 80 people there. And we looked at each other and we're like, oh God, we need at least 50 people to cover the expenses for the show. And so we did the sound check and started to get ready and, you know, put makeup on and whatever. And the brother of my guitar player at the time, he went out to get something. And we said like, well, look, if there's some people, maybe there are some people there. So yeah, he leaves, and then it like half an hour, 45 minutes. Then he finally comes back, and we're like, where the hell have you been? And he was like, well, it was insane. I should have never gone out. Like the whole place is packed, and there's like people outside in the parking lot, and there's still people waiting. And we were like, you're kidding. And he was like, no, just open the side door of the venue and look outside. And so we opened the door and we're like, oh my God, this is... So we sold out that place on our first show. And we were like, okay, I guess we're on to something. And then we just did more shows, but like it didn't last that long, because then like after like 9 months or something, the singer met this girl and she got pregnant, and then like he had to move to a different city. And then it was just like I tried a couple of other people, but the chemistry didn't work. Like we had a singer from the UK coming in, But like he used his trips to bring drugs into Europe, into Germany, and I was like, no, that doesn't work, because like I can't deal with people like that, and because like when it comes to stuff like that, I'm boring as hell. Like I don't drink, I never took drugs in my whole life because like I just never understood it. Yeah, and then the whole grunge thing happened, so I was like, okay, no, I do some other stuff at the moment. It just doesn't seem right, and then it only picked up when I was traveling with Eric Singer for like I think like 5 or 6 weeks through Europe doing those Kiss conventions where he was like a special guest. Then that's how the new generation of Shameless started in '98.
Oh, wow. So how did you get involved with Eric doing that?
I met Eric the first time, it was like 92, 93 at a Kiss show. We started to talk about cars right away because he's also like a total car geek. So, we started talking about this and that. And it was funny because like he was more into German cars while I was more into American cars. But like he was obviously like, telling me stories about like what kind of cars his dad had. And that's how we became friends. And then when we started to do those Kiss convention tours in Europe, like in '94, we did one with Peter Criss. '95, we had Ace Frehley. Then sadly in '96, we got tortured by Vinnie Vincent for 4 weeks until he freaked out and disappeared. Oh, actually, we left him in his hotel room because like while he was in that room, in like 30 hours or something, he got a bill for room service and whatever for like over like I think it was like $2,500. And we said we're not paying that. And it was the end of the tour anyway, so we said no, we just leave him there. And we still have no idea how he actually got out of that mess because we were like, well, we're not paying for that. Like, whatever you do there, that's just like insanity on the highest level. And like to this day, like he keeps on doing the same stuff, like, taking pre-orders for demo box sets and whatever, but like he never sends the stuff out, but people pay a lot of money for nothing.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting story. Oh, my gosh.
No, it was definitely an experience. And then like in '98, Eric Singer was the guest, and then we traveled together all the time. And, obviously also started talking about music and this and that. And then he offered to help.
That's great. So then he joined Shameless. Was that around 1998?
Oh, no, he didn't join it because like the first record was pretty much just me and BC. And we had special guests on the first record. And like Robert Sweet from Striper played on a couple of songs. Eric played on a couple.
He's great.
Brian Tishy, who was like, at that point, this was like before he was in Billy Idol and all those bands. So like Shameless, I think, was actually the first or one of the first things he did. Yeah, and that's how the whole thing got together. And then like the first record like got so much attention. And I remember by the time it came out, I already started to work on the second one. Because on the first one, we didn't even tour because it was just like a crazy idea. Oh, let's do that one record, because I had all those songs written and this and that. But then like it took off and I was like, okay, now let's do the next one. And then we went on tour. Well, we actually had Bruce Kulick, the guitar playing Kiss. He was with us on tour. Like there's videos of us like, well, he was also on tour. So that was also a lot of fun. Because like Bruce is great. And like to this day, like on the last Shameless record, I think he played on like maybe like 4 or 5 songs. Just Eric was not able to do anything the last few years because like, Kiss was a full-time job, as we all know. And but we're still great friends. Like I talk to him pretty much all the time about cars.
Bruce is great. I know, if you just go, just for the sake of the audience, if you just go to YouTube and put in Shameless, and Bruce is up, I think, on 4 of your songs that are on YouTube. And I think one song that I really love is Live Your Dream. And that kind of goes hand in hand with, writing talking about writing your book, The DeLorean. So how did that come about? How did it come about, you getting a DeLorean? I've always been a fan of sports cars. I know you don't know me that well, but my dad used to race midgets. You know, he used to race cars in the 50s and 60s. And at one point, He was like a paid driver. Yeah. So when I was growing up, my sister and I, he was so strict with us. He made us learn how to drive on stick shift. And it was just like a constant road test every time he was in the car with us. But my first sports car was a Mazda MX-3. And then my second one was a Nissan 350. And my current one is a Porsche Boxster 718. So
cool.
I love cars. My dad loved cars. So I really appreciate the whole car connection with you. How did you get involved in the car, the DeLorean itself, but more importantly, just cars in general?
Well, that also all started because of Kiss. Because in 1983, we had a German music magazine called Bravo. And in that magazine, there was an article about like Ace Frehley getting arrested in his DeLorean. And in the article, it showed two pictures of the car. And first I thought like that's some prop or something for Kiss photo shoot, because it was the gull wing doors and like it was in silver. Like it just looked, that's a car for a Kiss photo shoot. And then somebody told me, no, that's actually a real car. And then I was just like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And then like, I tried to find out more about the car, but at that point, there was no internet in 1983, but I found like a few like car magazines where they talked about the car. And at that point, the company was already gone because like, they went bankrupt. And that's just like how I got into cars. And then like, it was obviously like the most iconic movie when it comes to cars is Smokey and the Bandit, and that's how I found out about Trans Ams. And that's how I got into those kind of cars. And then a few years later, I was in the States, and my friend Danny, he told me to go somewhere and to use I think it was his dad's car, and it was an old Cadillac. And I was like, well, and then I drove that Cadillac for like 4 or 5 days. And at that point in Germany, I just had like a stupid like VW, a Golf. I think in the States it was called the Rabbit. And I sold that car and bought like, I bought I think it was the first one was a Trans Am. Yeah. And I bought a Trans Am. And from that moment on, I was just like, I didn't want to drive any weird like European or German cars. And then a couple of years later, like I bought the DeLorean. Then I did, because in all the time I always did research about DeLorean, especially when the internet came and you found all those like videos on YouTube and everything. And then because of a lucky accident, that's how I started doing the book. Because like a friend of mine, he told me about this photographer in the UK that took all the Formula One images at the races and stuff. And so he was like a really famous photographer. But at one point in 1978, John DeLorean hired him to take pictures of everything that happens in Belfast. But when I got in touch with him, because like he retired and sold his photo archive of all the images, and including like the copyrights and everything. And I was like, okay, you want to sell? I take it. And that's how the idea for the book came, because I had already all the information that like the company only went bankrupt because the government destroyed the company with lies and other stuff, and that's how I started writing the book. And it was actually Eric Singer also, once again, when I told him about the idea for the book and stuff, and now it's going to be ready and it's 500 pages and everything. And then he said something like, well, you should release a song with the book. But this was like, I think it was like, yeah, right when the COVID thing happened. I knew this person. She had the singer, because like our guys were not available at that time. So like that's why we ended up having a girl singing, on that track. That was also like, yeah, the song got so much response, like everywhere, like, radio stations, especially like in Ireland and Northern Ireland, like were playing it everywhere. And it was like, I was shocked myself, like that the song got such a huge response.
Yeah, it's a great song. It's like very catchy and very rememberable, but also the video. The video is great because you can actually see pictures of, John DeLorean. You could see how it was advertised, and it reminds me because how it starts out, it talks about the early 1980s, and that car actually made its way into the Back to the Future movie. So a lot of people that follow that movie would recognize that, that car.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's always funny, like when I go to those DeLorean events, and like, I would say like probably like 70-80% of the people that are there got into DeLoreans because of Back to the Future. And I didn't see that movie until some point in the mid-90s. Because like when that movie came out, I was just like so busy with like music and this and that. So I never really watched movies. But like, yeah, a lot of DeLorean owners, they're like into the car because of the movie. And then when I tell them like the reason I got into it was in 83 because Ace Frehley had one. And they always look at me like, it's like they never heard that story. Even like John's kids, like his daughter and his son, like when we were talking about that, because like John's son is also like, he's pretty much a rocker. So he was like, oh my God, like that's the first time I hear something like that. Because like every time he went to events, then like everybody's like, oh yeah, no, I saw Back to the Future and that's what did it. And I was like, no, not for me.
That's great. So I actually recently, like 2 months ago, I did an event, a public event that I was doing, and there happened to be a DeLorean in the parking lot. And, a lot of people came over and they had it on display, because you don't see them often, And there was a lot of people asking questions, and I walked up to it, and it was the first time I had really been up to a DeLorean, like most recently. And you could tell it was aged. It wasn't in pristine condition, but it was still drivable, And the crowd that formed around this car really like kind of took me back, And it was a New Jersey event. It was just fairly local, but it really kind of gained a lot of attention. At the same event, there was the car from Ghostbusters. It looks like a kind of long station wagon, kind of an ambulance style. Yeah. But the amount of people between that one and the DeLorean was quite different. I mean, everyone wanted to be around the DeLorean. So being a DeLorean owner, I've never had the privilege to drive one or, to even get a ride in one. Tell me about that vehicle, because being a car person myself, I'm kind of very picky, especially with owning a car. Like it has to really feel right to me, but it also has to have kind of the right horsepower and all that. So what was your experience like? How would you give the review of the DeLorean? Because it's too bad, like you said, that the government kind of changed it, gave out some information and ruined the company in that way. What were the reviews from more of like the owners or the reviews of more of the drivers versus the false information that was put out?
Well, I mean, like the main thing, was what you just said about the government, because that's a story like now it gets out more and more, because like back then, like they accused him of like, dealing with drugs and everything. But like the whole thing, the government, the FBI invented a crime to get him out of business. Because like somebody in the States was afraid that like if he succeeds with his company, that like that could kill the industry in Detroit. Because if you think about it, like John DeLorean, he was like the rock star of the car industry in the late 60s and 70s. And like he increased the sales of Pontiac to insane numbers. So they saw him as a threat, and then, like 15 years later, that's pretty much what Toyota did. Like because now the car industry in Detroit is pretty much gone. Because like, just think about all the companies that are not there anymore, like Pontiac. Now Lincoln is still there, but like Oldsmobile and like all those companies that are just gone. Yeah, and that's why they invented that crime, They sent somebody to him and said like, oh, look, you have money problems, we help you, to rescue your company. But then it turned out like the drugs were involved. So like he wanted to get out of the deal, and they told him, look, if you don't come to that meeting in LA, we will kill your kids. I mean, there are audio recordings about this where they threatened like to send his daughter's head back to him in a shopping bag and stuff like that. So he went to that meeting. The two drug dealers there, they brought in like suitcases with probably cocaine. And he looked at it, and his lawyer, who he talked to before, told him, like, look, whatever you're doing there, don't tell them, like, oh, you're going to report this. Just play along. And that's what you'll see, because the FBI recorded that meeting, and you see him saying something like, oh, this is better than gold. Like, it weighs less than gold. And the second, like a minute or something after they opened the case for him, it knocks on the door. And it's like, oh, it's the FBI, John DeLorean, you're under arrest. And the crazy thing was, like, those two drug dealers were not drug dealers. They were also from the FBI. So the whole thing was just like created, to destroy his name. Because like back then, what did you have in the States? I mean, like you had like maybe like 2 or 3 TV stations, because this was like, I think it was before private, like cable TV started. So, and then people would just believe what they see on the news and what they read in the newspaper. And that's how they destroyed his name. And that's also a big part of my book, to show actual documents that like pretty much everything that the government tried to tell people was a lie.
Yeah, it's interesting that you documented all of that. How is the DeLorean family with you documenting it? They were happy that you did it, or this is probably one of the only books written about them. Is that correct?
There were other books written about him before, but then a lot of those books, you can tell like the motivation for those books was just money, because like, it's a crappy story. Like, we can sell this. But both of his kids, because obviously like John passed away like almost 20 years ago now. And his kids, they really like the book, so, and that's cool, and also like the fact that like the story gets out now more than it did before, because there's also a documentary about that now on Amazon, at the moment only in the States and in the UK, and it's called The Missing Pieces. And that also tells a lot of the stuff, because when I went to the National Archive in London, I found documents that proved even more lies from the British government. And it's just like, I mean, like I don't trust any kind of politicians, but like you should, that was probably like his only mistake, like, to get involved with the government, because you cannot trust those people. And I always say this, like when you have people that talk about, oh, I'm such a big fan of that guy, like president or whatever it is. And I always say, like, do you actually know that person? Because all you know is like the stuff that they tell you on TV or whatever. So like, I'm like, no, how can you be a fan of somebody that you don't know? That's just like,
yeah,
I don't understand.
I understand. It gets complicated. What is it like being an owner of a DeLorean? Because like even here, I know from owning a Porsche that not everyone will work on one, or you have to bring it to the dealer. So do you have difficulties finding people that will actually work on it, because it is a dated, vehicle?
Well, we have a couple of mechanics here, but my main guy is a guy in Belgium, because the guy is so great, and he does, if there's, like if I have it completely checked or whatever, like I always either have it shipped to him or drive up there, because it's like a 10-hour drive. And like, Jesus, like I love to go on road trips. I was just talking to a friend of mine, because like about like doing other road trips and stuff, and I just love doing that. So I don't see that as a problem. In your previous question about like, driving the car, I mean, you have to be honest, because like sometimes you see people and they compare it to a new car, and it's like, it's not the fastest car, but like nothing that came out at that time period, because of all the regulations you had in the States, nothing was fast at that time. And with the emissions, they had to put like a different kind of catalytic system into the car that killed a lot of the horsepower. But on mine, all that stuff is gone, and it has now headers in the car, and it drives great. I mean, sure, if you want to compare it to like a new Corvette, you're just an idiot, because that's like comparing like, oh, let's have like a 15-year-old guy and an 80-year-old guy do a marathon. Who will win? Or who will run faster?
That's hilarious. I agree with you. I agree with you, because many years ago, I picked up a VW Bug, and it was a 1976 VW Bug.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I couldn't believe how light it was. I mean, on a windy day, I was all over the road in that thing. And I was like a nervous wreck, because the weight of the vehicle, the kind of materials that they used, and also another vehicle that I had driven at one point that I owned was a 1976 Mercury Cougar. And if you remember what those looked like, I mean, it could take up 2 parking spaces. It was so long. But also the heaviness of the metal that was in that vehicle. It took like 2 arms to push the door out, So I really appreciate your comments on that. What would you, if you had the opportunity, what would you like to say about the DeLorean? Because as a writer myself, just kind of documenting, everything that I documented in my book, I always find that I learned something about me. What did you learn about you in writing about the DeLorean?
I just love doing it, like doing all the research, like I felt like a private investigator, but then like you find out all those things, and it was just like, it blows your mind, like Jesus, like how come nobody ever found out about this? Because, for example, like just one little example is like, like back then, like the British government gave him like $100 million to form the company, which is pretty much an absolute joke, because like Pontiac, when they started the Fiero, the development, that cost something, I think it was like $500 million. But Pontiac in 1984 already existed. I mean, everybody knew it, but like with DeLorean, they started everything. The company, the car, everything. The company, the factory was built on a cow field outside of Belfast. And that was also one thing, when they said like, oh, we give you $100 million. And he already had the idea to use like a couple of empty buildings at the docks in Belfast. But the government said, no, you have to build it here in Dunmary. So out of the $100 million, he had to spend, I think, about $50 million to build the area there. And now the area is still there because it's a industrial park in Dunmary. And the park was only built because of the DeLorean motor cars.
Wow, that's really fascinating. That is incredible.
And also like a big thing, when you think about that, like they had about like 2,500 employees at the company. Belfast had the highest unemployment rate, I think, in Europe, where pretty much like almost every second person was without a job. So in that time, when those 2,500 people, which is a lot, worked for DeLorean, the government didn't have to pay unemployment benefits. So just that money, what they saved, you just have to do the calculation. 2,500 people, if everyone gets like 1,500 pounds a month by 2,500, and then by 2 or 2.5 years, that's a lot of money. So technically, the government didn't pay anything. But then they had the change in the political parties, and Margaret Thatcher came, and she didn't want to be involved in the whole thing. And then she and Reagan, I mean, it sounds like a crazy movie, but like that's really what happened.
Yes.
And that's how they killed the company.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm going to look forward to hearing you promote all of your stuff. If you could just plug your upcoming stuff and your websites and your social media.
The easiest website is pretty much just like Alexx with 2X, Michael.com, because that shows you everything that I'm doing. Like it shows you the upcoming tour dates, because like I'll be on tour in July and August. And then actually we just start to work on another tour in the UK that will happen in November, December. And then there's already talk about like doing some other stuff. And plus I start working on a new Shameless record. And on this tour, it's actually funny because like I play in both bands because like first we do a set with Shameless with Stevie Rachelle, and then Cherie comes on, and then we do a set with Cherie. So that will be very exciting. And we just found out we're going to play the Wacken Festival in Germany, which is, I think they sold already like 80,000 tickets there or something. So that's very exciting. And, you know, and there's always something going on. Like, it never gets boring. But like, yeah, the main thing is just like Alexx Michael, Alex with 2X, alexxmichael.com, because like this shows you really everything that I'm, you know, makes it easy for people to find.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're going to roll out with your song Nonstop City by Shameless. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. It was great being here.
When you're feeling low and you got no place to go, let us take you down to Nonstop City. Hello, boys and girls, welcome to our show. Good times come and bad times go. Wanna join us? Let's go! It's Friday night, don't stay at home. The girls of the city look so pretty. Come on, move your feet. This is music on the streets. Don't need a passport to come with us. Ready for the show? Come on, let's rock and roll. When you're feeling low, when you got no place to go, let us take you down to Nonstop City. You will find what you need. Satisfaction's guaranteed. Come alive in the night, and the feeling is alright. Party all night, feel alright. Just come with us. Ready for the show? Come on, let's rock and roll. When you're feeling low and you got no place to go, let us take you down to Nonstop City. When you're feeling low and you got no place to go, let us take you down to Nonstop City. Yeah. When you're feeling low and you got no place to go, let us take you down to Nonstop City. When you're feeling low and you got no place to go,